Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar on using person-centred thinking skills with people who are living with dementia. My name's Jill Bailey and I'll be your presenter for today, but I wanted to start off with a question. So, can we deliver personalised support if we do not know what matters to people and what best support looks like? Well, we don't believe that we can. We know that personalisation starts with the person, knowing who they are and what matters to them and how they want to be supported. So a one-page profile really is the foundation of personalisation. Without this information, people are likely to be treated as a clinical condition, and the dementia would often be seen first. So this is Bessie's one-page profile, and a one-page profile really describes what people value about somebody, what's important to them, and how best to support them. It reflects the balance between what matters to people, but also how we can ensure that people get what's important for them in terms of staying healthy and safe. Some of you may be quite familiar with the one-page profile. It kind of provides a useful mechanism to capture really rich information in order to enhance the delivery of truly personalised support. The next step, of course, is then to think with the person and those who know them best about what's working and not working in their life. So a one-page profile and knowing and acting on what's working and not working are the crucial building blocks for personalised services. And obviously, you'd get a very different understanding of who Bessie is from a one-page profile than you generally would from a care plan. We also know that setting the bar at dignity sets the bar way too low. So I want to share some stories and examples from people living with dementia of how these approaches have really made a difference to the quality of life. So this is Bessie. Bessie doesn't use words to speak typically. So it's about the quality of our listening and the best guesses of those who know Bessie best and those who love and care most about her. So it's really key that we're working proactively with families to make sure that we're listening well to the contribution that they have to make. And it's kind of that recognition that when we listen with skill and respect, we can really discover what matters to people and what support makes sense to them. And these person-centred thinking skills, I think, help us to listen more deeply and more carefully. And the quality of our listening is so important. So some of the conversations that we had with Bessie and those closest were around good days and bad days, thinking about if I could, I would, and really trying to focus on the fact that what's important to a person is only what that person is telling us with the words or the behaviour. So what was Bessie letting us know around what really mattered to her? What made her happy, content and fulfilled, what really increased her well-being. And learning what matters to a person is just so crucial, because given that our quality of life is determined by the presence or the absence of those things that truly matter to us, it makes it even more important that we ensure that we're listening well to people who live with a dementia as well. So what we learned from Bessie was that kind of a bath with bubbles, being complimented, having manicure, pedicure. Bessie thoroughly enjoyed that, obviously looked forward to it. So one of the things that was really helpful with this as well was that in terms of, so we kind of think that maybe we need a paradigm shift in our thinking if we're to truly move towards personalised support, moving away from a task focus. And the fact that when Bessie was going to be having a bath, because the team supporting her knew that, you know, kind of a pampering environment really worked for Bessie. It was about, rather than getting through the baths, it was about making it a really good experience. And some of the bathrooms in some residential care homes can be quite clinical and sterile and cold. And the staff were they were thinking differently. They were going out of the way to put colourful throws over the equipment that was in the bathroom, you know, a few candles, a bit of music, so that it really became a really good experience that hopefully simply becomes the way that everybody practices, if you like. So thinking about what we learn on the one-page profile, which tells us that initial information around how a person wants to live and be supported, we've got to ask, well, given that's what's important to you, is it present or absent? Is it working or not working? So this is key, that we don't collect person-centered information without doing something with it. We must upfront and early ask what's working and not working. So it's almost a comparison analysis. On the one-page profile, we learn what matters to people, how they want to be supported. And on what's working, what's not working, we learn what's the current reality. Are those things present or absent? So it's a powerful bridge between how people want to live and how they're actually living and being supported. And the function of working, not working, is really to create change that makes life better for people and their allies. We learn what to build on and we learn what needs to change, and this supports this idea of our continual listening and learning. So it generates a process that's led by things that are most prominent in a person's life, because it's about the things that matter to folk. So self-directed support in its purest sense, and the one-page profile begins to grow into a much richer document based on our continual listening and learning, regardless of whether people use words to speak or not. This is kind of for everybody. So we're using person-centered thinking skills to frame our conversations, learning what makes a good day, what makes a bad day, thinking about people's routines, and capturing what we're learning. Now, what we learned from Mary, Mary is in the kind of early onset stage of her experience of a dementia, but one of the things that was vitally important to Mary, and Mary lives in a residential service, was her Roman Catholic faith. What wasn't working was that she'd not been to Mass in a number of years. So by really thinking, Mary's team really thought with her. They knew that within that restrictive service they weren't going to have more money or more resources. We know in these challenging times that that's not going to happen. And we also know that if we keep doing what we're already doing, we'll just get more of the same. So they knew that they had to think differently. Think about how could they find natural networks, how could they think about where were the faith communities in the area, think about linking Mary with those faith communities. And actually Mary was matched with a lady called Stella, and in the end it was actually through the University of the Third Age, which is an organisation that's primarily for older people in learning, but it does have other branches such as befriending. And so it was by matching Mary with Stella from University of the Third Age, they met together. Mary and Stella started going to Mass together, and of course Mary became connected with other people in the church community who'd say, well, we pass where you live, Mary, why don't you come to the coffee morning? So it kind of evolved from just going to Mass on a Sunday to actually going to the coffee mornings and the social evenings on a Thursday evening as well. So for John, it was a much smaller thing. What John said wasn't working. John, again, lives in a residential service for people who are living with dementia. And what John said wasn't working was he was constantly missing his favourite radio show on a Friday evening on Radio 4, because he'd forget that it was on. So what we knew was that best support ensured that you go and support John and help him tune the radio into Radio 4 at 6 o'clock each Friday so that he could listen to this particular show. What Winnie said wasn't working, again in a residential service, was the cup of tea and the dry biscuit at supper time. What Winnie said she wanted was a nip of whiskey and a tea and a wagon wheel for supper. Easily put right without costing time or money necessarily. It was simply about knowing. And actually this is Nora, who lives in the same home as Winnie, and Nora doesn't use words to speak. But she let us know when she saw Winnie's whiskey that she'd have a bit of whiskey as well. And it's kind of that idea that if people only know red or blue, How do they choose yellow, green, or a whole rainbow of colours? So these different opportunities open up other things for other people as well. What we learned wasn't working for Nora was that not all staff knew how to support her well at bedtime, and we kind of knew that because people were describing Nora as being challenging or severely challenging, and we kind of have learned that when people are described as challenging or severely challenging, quite often they're complaining or severely complaining about the support that they're receiving. And what we realised was it was when it was staff who didn't know Nora very well, or agency staff that were supporting her to get ready for bed, was when Nora would become quite distressed. So the staff that knew Nora really well and had all that rich learning in the head captured that onto kind of a more focused one page that was specific around supporting Nora to get ready for bed. So that even if you or I were parachuted in to help Nora, however unacceptable that may feel, it does happen, at least we could make it less horrible by actually knowing that Nora must wash her face herself. What had been happening, the new staff had been going in and attempting to wash Nora's face, and of course she'd hit out at them. We'd have safeguarding alerts. But actually, by knowing that you need to set it up and fill the basin with warm water and lather Nora's flannel up with Dove soap and then give it to her and she'd wash her face herself, it made things much better. Just those little things about knowing that Nora always has 4 pillows arranging comfortably behind her, the little lamp needs to stay on all night, the door needs to be left slightly ajar, that she must always wear a clean nightie, and to support her well, you hold 2 or 3 nighties up and Nora will choose the one that she needs. It made a real difference to Nora's lived experience, and that's the key thing that matters. So I really like this this quote from John O'Brien that talks about a well-defined understanding of what's important to and important for somebody, with a regular review asking what's working and not working that actually leads to action being a necessary condition for any form of service provision, seems to really capture those points in a nutshell. So we begin to inform the one-page profile from the conversations. Winifred's another lady who lives with dementia in a residential service. And we met with Winifred and the people who love and care most about her and the people who know her best. And these are really, this idea of proactively working with families is so fundamental to this process. So we're learning more about the things that matter to Winifred, the things that increase her well-being, and how best to support her. The idea being that this becomes our job description and helps us ensure that these things are present on a day-to-day basis, and that Winifred's consistently supported in a way that really makes sense to her, even if there are lots of different staff involved in a support. So this is really about making sure that a person's day-to-day experience is how they want it to be. And of course, how that'll be reflected from this information that's captured on the one-page profile. And what we learned from Winifred and her family and the staff that knew her well was that she was happiest when she was busy. She'd always been a wonderful homemaker. So all of the staff in this home also developed their own one-page profiles, and I'll talk about that in a little while. But that was also really central to the self-directed support process, so that we match in key workers and people who are living here based on hobbies, interests and personality characteristics, rather than what typically happens in a residential care home for elders where a key worker is simply appointed. So all the staff at this particular home, including housekeepers, maintenance staff, regardless of role, have been supported to develop their own one-page profiles. And that really helps to match staff with people who live at the home and who have the same or similar interests. And we know that getting the best match is arguably one of the most important decisions that had impact on a person's life. Doing something that you want to do can still be a miserable experience if you're doing it with somebody who doesn't enjoy it or who you don't connect with. So it's kind of, I think, very quite obvious that one of the single most powerful things we can do if we're to improve somebody's quality of life is ensure that they're supported by someone they like and someone who likes them. And these approaches actually have a knock-on effect. So, for example, Roy's a housekeeper at this particular home. He'd read John's one-page profile and discovered that they both had a great interest in general knowledge and would often quiz each other. And during conversations, John had mentioned to Roy how much he enjoyed classical music. And the manager in the home was delighted one evening to find that Roy had taken the time to seek out some classical CDs at home and brought them into work for John. And before he started his own housekeeping duties, he'd settled John into one of the small lounges and left him enjoying the classical CDs that he'd brought in. So we're kind of seeing a real shift in culture in organisations where person-centred thinking skills are really embedded into the bloodstream of how they work. And it also begins to change our relationship with staff, because we're giving a really clear message that who you are as a person really matters, and so conversations with staff members change too. So as I say, collecting person-centred information and not doing anything with it is wrong. So we learn how people want to live and be supported, develop a one-page profile, and we then consider how we learn if these things are present or absent for the person by the working, not working analysis. As soon as there's enough information about someone recorded in a one-page profile, we need to use this working, not working analysis to build an action plan to make sure that the support people are getting really works for them. So beginning with a one-page profile and growing it over time is a much more adoptable innovation to use within services. But we do have to be clear that it's a starting point, not an outcome, and should always lead to action through thinking about what's working and not working. And what's working, not working can be considered from a number of perspectives: the person's perspective, the family's perspective, the staff's perspective, and any other perspective that would be relevant in that person's life, such as a community matron. So what are the things that are working that people want to maintain and enhance? What's not working that people want to change? And so we see the function of the working, not working analysis to create actions that really do make life better. So we've kind of alluded to the matching tool, and we've talked about getting a good match between the person supporting and the person being supported, whether paid or unpaid, is crucial. And the matching tool is a simple way to record what's needed to give a person the best match between the person living with a dementia and staff or volunteers. So it's a good match is really a win-win situation. When we take into account a staff member's characteristics and interests, as well as the skills and experience, we're more likely to get a match that's enjoyable for everyone. And when staff enjoy the work, they're more likely to stay longer in the role, and this increases stability for individuals and decreases staff turnover for organisations. And it could be argued that we're less likely to see issues of abuse and neglect when we pay good attention in matching people well. And this approach is of course, much more likely to help to deliver personalised services rather than covering shifts. So as we've said, the quality of the match, one of the most powerful determinants of quality of life for people who are dependent on others for support. And where people spend time in a communal setting, whether that be a day service or a residential service, we're really looking at how people's one-page profiles to learn what are the shared hobbies and interests of a number of people, so that group activity can be based around the things that people enjoy, and then by looking at staff one-page profiles, we can identify a staff member who also shares that interest to lead the group activity. So we're getting more and more win-win situations where services are designed around what we're learning from each individual supported, and the staff member gets to do something that they enjoy. So it's really about making sure people's day-to-day experiences is how they want it to be. This is an example of one of the staff one-page profiles. Winifred, whose one-page profile we saw earlier, was matched with Beryl, who's the housekeeper at this home. And actually, this has simply become the way that Winifred spends her time, and her well-being is clear to see. Working alongside Beryl, taking a real role in looking after a home, has become simply the way that Winifred spends her time, really. So May is another lady, and May again lives in a residential service supporting people living with dementia. May used the good day, bad day, person-centered thinking, information gathering exercise, if you like, with Paula, a key worker at the home where she lives. And if you met May, she'd be telling you about her years as an advertising executive and the huge ghastly advertising boards that she had to put up around Stockport. And she'd also tell you wonderful stories of the time that she spent as Commissioner of all guide troops in South Stockport. So what May and Paula were thinking about around what made a good day, and what May was telling Paula, was that she'd always loved to have a manicure, look after her nails, and they kind of, Paula was asking May, well, if I could or would, you know, if you could do something that would really make a good day, what would it be? And May said how she'd always gone to the beauty salon to get her nails done. And as you can see here, they were able to make that happen. And again, thinking about community connecting, how do we make more and more of this happening, because in these challenging times we've got to do things differently. So this is Ellen, and sometimes matching a member of staff requires little thinking because people simply have a wonderful relationship with somebody. And this is Ellen and Olivia, and it was easy to match Olivia and Ellen together. When Olivia walked into a room, Ellen's eyes would light up. They simply have a wonderful relationship. So of course, Olivia and Ellen were matched up together. So this is the Dementia Declaration, and the Dementia Action Alliance is made up of over 90 organisations who are really committed to transforming the quality of life of people living with a dementia. And it comprises of organisations that have signed up to the National Dementia Declaration. And this declaration identifies the challenge that dementia represents to the UK, really, and outlines outcomes that range from ensuring people with dementia have choice and control over their lives, to feeling a valued part of family, community and civic life, including people living with dementia having personal choice and control or influence over decisions that affect them. So using person-centered thinking tools gives us an evidence-based paper trail, really, of how we're doing in delivering personalised support. The agenda is really about people who receive support or use services having positive control over their lives within their own communities, and that won't be changed by creating good paper. It'll only be achieved by significant cultural change. And this is, I think, where embedding the use of person-centered thinking tools would be crucial, and ensuring that everyone involved in supporting the person have competency in using person-centered approaches. What we know is that all the strategies and reconfigured services in the world won't make a difference to people living with the dementia if somebody's immediate supporter isn't working in a truly person-centered way. So this graphic helps us think through how person-centered thinking skills can help us deliver on the required outcomes that are described on there. And I'll just give you a minute or two to just have a read through those. For example, the Dementia Declaration emphasises the importance of people living with dementia being supported in a way that makes sense to them. So that's statement 3 of the Dementia Declaration. And in a one-page profile, the how best to support me becomes the job description for everyone supporting the person. So I think it gives us a really good evidence base as well as truly impacting on a person's lived experience. Person-centered thinking tools like good days, bad days, top tips, relationship circles help us know what's important to and for a person and the balance between them. And this information is recorded, summarised, either a one-page profile, but we'd hope that that would grow into a more detailed person-centered description. But what if people aren't always able to be heard? What if people don't use words to communicate? Christine Bryden is an expert by experience. Christine was diagnosed with a dementia some years ago and is a great advocate on for people who are experiencing dementia. One of the tools that we find helpful is the communication chart, and you see Doris's example here. So if I can just tell you a little bit about Doris. Doris lives in Lancashire with her daughter Joanne and Joanne's three teenage children. A real live wire, Doris always has a ready smile. She'll go out of her way to help others. And Joanne had also thought that she was pretty good at best guessing what many of the behaviours that Doris began to show. So she knew that when Doris was taking other people's hats off, she knew that Doris had always, for whatever reason, kept her underwear in a hat. So she knew, and I think you'll see it described on the communication chart there, that if at any time Doris takes hats off other people's heads, what we think it means is she's run out of hats in a room. Doris always keeps her underwear in a hat before placing it in the drawer, and what we should do in response, support her to buy a new hat. Now that'd be, that'd be a really difficult thing to best guess if you didn't know that. But there were a number of things that Joanne couldn't understand what Doris was trying to tell her. So communication charts, what we know is that if people have the things that matter to them present in their lives, we need to know how they're letting us know. So the communication chart's a really powerful way to record how someone communicates. So what Joanne and her family did was decide to pay real attention to Doris's life story to see if that would give them some clues to explain some of Doris's actions, because they felt as a family that they were becoming less and less connected with her. And Joanne, Doris's daughter, explained that her real fear was that her mum would become isolated in her own bubble as her dementia progressed, and that she'd drift further and further away from them unless they learnt more about this and were really able to step into her reality. And friends and neighbours who'd known Doris in her younger years had a real crucial part to play in building this portrait of a story, really. They were able to tell Joanne that Doris had turned to the Roman Catholic faith during the war years and had been a devout worshipper between 1943 and 1949. Now, Joanne was born in 1959 and had no idea. She'd never known her mum as a practicing Catholic. And this helped them work out what some of Doris's actions meant, as described there in the communication charts. It also made Joanne think that her mum's current reality was those years, you know, during the war, because Doris's old friends had described how troubled Doris had been about running out of items during rationing, and this gave some clues as to why Doris was stacking up on so many items. And Joanne kind of really described her relief as, you know, she felt that they could really get closer to Mum simply by stepping into the bubble that's her reality with her, and making sure that she didn't drift further and further away from them because they were more aware of what she was telling them. And Joanne says there are still a number of things that they don't get, but they're constantly trying to learn what those things are about rather than just giving up. The learning log is a way to really record our ongoing listening and learning. So, and this can give us, you know, some really rich information about what's working well around the things that people do, things that people want to continue. And it kind of instructs family members and staff members, if you like, to really look for the learning, so that we're much more mindful to look and listen to what people are telling us, and what did we learn about what didn't work that needs to be different next time. So this is almost a very informal way of reviewing how things are going, and of course the person-centered review process would be the next step, and that would be the stage where we sit down more formally with professionals, family, the person, to ensure that the information really stays updated in a person's one-page profile or person-centered description. This is Hilda, and this is Hilda's history map. What we know is that understanding someone's history or life story is a very important way to learn about them. And we also know that most residential services pay really good attention to this, whether it be through a page in somebody's care plan or more sophisticated memory boxes, books, films. You know, there's a whole variety and wealth of information out there around developing life story. And the thing is, we can learn from somebody's life story about what matters to them and how to support them well, and of course that can inform that personalised information. Personal backgrounds can help us understand who a person is, can help us, as described in Doris's example, you know, it can give us a clue as to what some of the actions that people take mean. With history comes regard, this idea that we really get the essence of who somebody is from the life story and all that they've achieved or who they've been in the life. We can also learn vital information from life story work that helps us understand why people can become distressed as well. One lady who lived in a residential service, she was a retired health visitor, and she'd become so distressed in a home where dolls were used, because she'd see people carrying dolls about by the hair, and she was so concerned about it because she saw it as a real abuse of the babies. Another lady who would go rigid and shake whenever the ironing board came out, and it turned out that actually her husband used to burn her with the iron. Now sometimes we'll never know what the reason behind something is, but what's really important is that we recognise that if somebody goes rigid and shakes, that, you know, is great support to just go and sit with them and let them know that they're okay and we're okay, or learn what does good support look like to that person. Another lady who'd cry when she saw the hairdresser come into the home, and the hair rollers, and it turned out that she'd been assaulted and hair rollers had been pushed into her head, causing severe damage to her scalp. So it can be crucial that we know that information. And of course, more obvious things like, you know, a man who would always continually check the doors, and his work had been as a security guard. Another man who'd sit with his hands raised and clenched, and initially it was seen as, you know, it was deemed to be challenging, but it turned out that he'd actually been a heavy goods vehicle driver. And it came to the team when they looked at his life story that he was actually holding the steering wheel. So they were able to support him to go to a local transport depot. And he actually, you know, his well-being was just so clearly, you know, in a real state of well-being as he got into the lorry and held onto the wheel. So as well as beginning to learn how to support people well, life stories also provide information or clues around what's important to the person now. But it's got to be, I think our learning's shown us that it's got to be a life story that includes the past, the present and the future. It's got to be a living story, because a life story doesn't replace the detailed knowledge of what's important to someone. And actually, I recall a lady who'd been a vegetarian for her whole life, but you know, she's now at the point where she's eating meat. She's taking meat off other people's plates. She's clearly demonstrating that she wants to eat meat. And Ken Clasper's a man who speaks up and down the country and writes a blog. He's been diagnosed with a dementia, and he talks about how his tastes have changed completely. I think he talked about how his taste in food, his taste in music have really changed. Another lady who used to be meticulous about having a hairset now detested going to the hairdressers. So we have to be mindful that we don't trap people into a lifestyle that made sense in the past, but not in the present. Another person-centered thinking tool that we use is the relationship circle. What's important to people will almost always include people, family, friends, neighbours, work colleagues, and we can learn and record who the important people in someone's life are by having conversations and using the person-centered thinking tool called the relationship circle. So that's either, you know, speaking with the person if they're able to tell us, or involving the person with people who know them best and love and care most about them, who can make the best guesses. And a relationship circle is particularly useful for exploring who a person knows, how they know them, how these networks can help a person find opportunities and support to live a life that really does make sense for them. And Doreen, this is Doreen's picture on the slide there. By using community maps and the relationship circle, and thinking about the things that matter to Doreen with her and those closest to her, including places that are or have been important to her, Doreen has been supported to really reconnect with the vibrant church community that she used to have such a central role in. So this again has made a massive, massive difference to Doreen in terms of how she spends her time and her days. So this is Ellen kind of summing up, I think, that certainly in our experience so far, personalisation really does require that we go beyond person-centred care, which is vitally important, but we move beyond that to really emphasise supporting people living with dementia to live the best possible life that they can. And this is absolutely central to the Dementia Declaration and key to the vision for adult health and social care and the sector-wide partnership agreement, Think Local, Act Personal. So I'm going to hand back to Kerry now, just to ask if there are any questions. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jill. I have one question for you, and the question is, what is the difference between person-centred care and personalisation?
Okay, I guess that I understand person-centred care as treating the person with dignity and respect and seeing the person as an individual. I think that the difference between that and personalisation is in personalisation we're putting a much stronger emphasis on the person having choice and control in their life. And it kind of feels like person-centred care is, may still be a little passive. It's caring for somebody as an individual and giving them dignity and treating them with respect, whereas personalisation says not only do we see you as an individual, but we keep checking whether we're delivering what's important to you and how you want to be supported, because that's you being in control of your own life. We, I guess, intentionally really look at communication charts and decision-making agreements, because if we don't do that, we can't support folks to have as much control in their life as possible. And we take that even further by people having control over the resources that they're entitled to if we go through to the individual service fund model or a direct payment. So in my limited experience, it looks like the tools that you see most prevalent in person-centred care are histories, which is about understanding the person and seeing them as an individual, which is great. But the tools that you'll see used most where you have personalisation and self-directed support are one-page profiles, because we can't support people to have more choice and control in their life until we know what's important to them. So it includes what matters to them, how they want to be supported, which then becomes our job description. And as we've talked about, what's working, what's not working, we seek to continually improve what we're doing and move forward. So rather than just seeing the world from the person's perspective, we're making sure that we're acting on it and using communication charts, decision-making agreements, relationship maps, community connecting, person-centred reviews and such are some of the tools that can help us with that. Is any more questions, Kerry?
No, that's it for today.
Okay. Well, thank you again for joining the webinar.